Now, each time on a Sunday, right about now, we look at the big stories, big issues in crime this week. And as always, to guide you through it, Jackie Hayes, who served with the Metropolitan Police for 30 years. Morning, Jackie.
Morning.
And one of the big issues which has been brought into focus this week, predominantly by what we saw at Tilbury Docks in Essex and those 35 people in that shipping container, one of whom died, is this idea of human trafficking. We know it goes on, but I mean, this has really brought it to the fore once again, hasn't it? How big an issue is this?
Well, it's becoming much, much bigger. This whole idea of slavery, if you like, we all thought it disappeared 180 years ago, but it's becoming a modern day problem again, human trafficking and enforced labour. And this week I spoke to DCI Mick Fortieth from the Kidnapping and People Trafficking Unit at the Metropolitan Police, and he talked about how organised this is and how people are actually making huge amounts of money out of the vulnerabilities of others. And this is my report.
UK border and immigration officials have launched an investigation tonight after 15 foreign migrants, including a teenage boy, were found locked inside a lorry in Somerset.
We're talking about 21 million a year. We're talking about 150,000 people in the EU area alone who are probably trafficked as modern slaves.
The whole picture in these premises lead me to believe that this is being used as a legal brothel, and perhaps the girls inside are being human trafficked.
Yeah, the unit's part of the Organised Crime Command and looks at the more organised element of human trafficking. So we have a dedicated resource of up to nearly 60 officers that investigate the more serious allegations of trafficking involving an organised criminal element. We deal with, in broad terms, 3 areas of exploitation, which are those people exploited through the sex trade, through forced labour or through domestic servitude. Within that we see a whole spectrum of different offences that are committed. Within domestic servitude it might be people that are being paid very, very low wages, paid to be cleaners. There may be people that are working on building sites for very low wages or otherwise. Generally somewhere is exploiting, somebody's making some money out of this particular exploitation, and probably over half of what we've dealt with at the moment involves the sex trade and exploitations within that. We probably have between 50 and 70 different operations we run at any particular time, and that's one of them that's probably the most largest and organised we have seen. The level of organisation went in through sort of Vishal Chowdhury, through his organiser, through his enforcer, Christian, and through his brother as well. It's probably one of the more organised groups we've seen. That involved using cheap flights to bring people in to work within the sex trade, some of whom, it's fair to say, probably knew they were coming in to work within the sex trade, others who thought they were coming to work in other vocations. The network had a number of brothels across London, across the UK, and to be fair, overseas as well. And it's probably one of our most longest running court cases we've run, and involves significant, thousands of exhibits, thousands of hours of work going in, and behind that, so over 120, 130 victims that we've managed to identify. Domestic servitude is an increasing number of cases we're seeing, and equally those within labour exploitation is another emerging area of the crime type as well, which we're seeing more and more of. There are people that are made to work extremely long hours, their conditions they work within, the conditions which they're made to live within, the limits on their freedom are significant. We've seen minors that are working in, just been dropped off at different addresses and are working as cleaners. One of our cases involved somebody that was delivered as a 10-year-old and has been living in those conditions for 20 years.
So how are they forced to stay here?
I think this is one of the concepts people find quite difficult to understand. There's the notion of visible handcuffs has been talked about, where people are debt bonded significantly. They're told they owe huge amounts of money from their home country. They believe their families are subject to threats of violence, themselves could be subject to threats of violence. So whilst if you saw them walking on the street, you might not be aware that there's this level of coercion in place. There are very high levels of exploitation.
Once you are able to break up such a criminal network, what happens to the victims? How are they supported?
So we're talking about charities, we're talking about faith-based groups, we're talking about significant support through the Catholic Church and increasingly through church and faith-based organisations. People could phone the national helpline number that you've got, people can phone 101, or if they're in immediate danger then they can get to a phone safely and phone 999, then that would be the immediate way to get some assistance. I'm hoping with the increased awareness, certainly across London and nationally, that if somebody has been that have been able to escape or made that phone call, that people would recognise it as trafficking as the crime type and provide the appropriate support.
The key thing that struck me from that interview, Jackie, is this idea of coercion, the fact that these people are not often physically, stuck in a house or what have you, but they feel emotionally unable to leave.
They're so vulnerable. Quite often there's a language barrier. They don't know where they are. And he talked to me off camera about one particular case where there's a woman who actually managed to find out the location she was being used in a particular brothel, and she was really badly beaten up just for finding out the exact location of where she was. So it's sometimes difficult for people to understand why these people can't just walk away and get help. But if you're in a foreign country, you don't speak the language, there's threats of violence against your family at home, and also this sort of these physical imaginary handcuffs they talk about is an emotional and psychological one, and it's very difficult to recover from that, even if they do manage to break free.
And as you said, a lot of issues for those people in that situation, trying to break free, trying to get in touch with the police or the authorities. What can people like you and I actually look out for?
It is difficult because it seems such an extraordinary idea that maybe the house next to you is somebody living in the basement being forced to work as a cleaner, and have been since they were 10-year-old. We were talking in there. But I think it's about getting to know your neighbours and seeing unusual behaviour maybe. There is a really good website that the Home Office have launched to raise awareness and to give people more information about what to look out for, and that's called Modern Slavery, and the helpline that was up there, 0800 0121 700, that's for anybody to ring. Obviously, if there's a victim listening who's desperate for help, that is the number to call. But for anybody who feels that there may be some unusual behaviour going on in their next door neighbours or in their neighbourhood, get on the phone or get on that website and have a look.
What do we know in all of this about the resources, the police resources that are available? Because it's, as you said, it's clearly a very big issue. So presumably it's going to take quite a lot of people to deal with it.
It does, and as you saw, Mick was saying about that one operation that took thousands of man-hours to put together, it is difficult. They really concentrate on the organised networks, those who actually perhaps may be involved in other crime areas as well, like drugs or importing illegal goods or even firearms. And so they have an established network around the world of transporting goods, and these people have become goods, commodities, just like drugs have, which is extraordinary. But it does take a lot of manpower. The Met's unit is about 60 officers. Other forces around the country won't necessarily have that facility, but the National Crime Agency takes the overall strategic view of it and works with European partners as well.
Okay, Jackie, thank you. And as Jackie said, if you have got any issues, 0800 0121 700 is that modern slavery helpline that you can contact free of charge. We've got more with Jackie in just a moment, including an appeal for helping find missing people, and why the Met Police aren't happy with the United Arab Emirates after it singled out London as one of the world's crime hotspots.